Asterisk, sometimes the people who save us aren't the ones we expect. Sometimes family isn't built by blood, but by moments of courage, sacrifice, and love. There are stories we hear that change how we see the world, and then there are stories we live through that change who we are forever. Before we begin, take a deep breath and listen closely, because this is not just my story, it's a lesson about resilience, trust, and the unbreakable bond that can grow in even the most unexpected places. My name is Ava, and today I want to tell you about the night my stepbrother saved my life, not just once, in the dramatic way that movies like to show, but many times, quietly and steadily, in the days and months that followed. Because being saved isn't always about a single heroic act. Sometimes it's about the small, everyday ways someone says, without words, "I'm here for you," until the fear finally loosens its grip, and you remember how to breathe again. I was 16 when my mom married Mark, a kind man who had a son named Ethan, who was a year older than me. To be completely honest, I did not want a new family, a new house, or a new last name. I wanted my old life back, the life with just mom and me and my little routines that felt safe and familiar. We used to live in a tiny apartment that always smelled like cinnamon toast on Saturday mornings, where the window looked out over a noisy street and the elevator made that soft, complaining groan every time it crawled up to the third floor. When we moved into Mark's big gray house on the corner with its trimmed hedges and perfectly polite neighbors, I felt like a visitor wearing someone else's shoes. I folded my arms around my chest like armor and told myself I wouldn't need anyone, especially not Ethan. The first week felt like I had stumbled into a play where everyone knew their lines except me. At dinners, I forced myself to smile, said please and thank you, nodded through endless conversations about neighborhood watch programs and the best place to buy mulch. And then at night, I lay awake listening to the new house breathe. Every creak of the stair treads, every sigh of the water heater sounded foreign. And somewhere down the hall, faint and steady, I could hear the sound of Ethan's guitar. He always played the same slow, careful pattern over and over. I never told him, but that soft music kept me company during those long, restless nights, asterisk at school. I pretended everything was fine, but inside, I felt like a transfer student dropped into the middle of someone else's story. People noticed that kind of newness. A few girls whispered about my thrift store jacket, about how quickly my mom had remarried after dad left. Their words stung, not because they were true, but because they were so easy. Easy cruelty leaves marks you can't see one Tuesday afternoon. After one of those small humiliations, I slipped behind the gym to sit on the back steps alone, wrapping my headphone cord around my finger until the tip turned white. Ethan found me there. He didn't ask what was wrong. He just sat beside me, handed me half of a granola bar, and said, "You don't have to like me yet, but it's okay to like the granola." It was such a simple, awkward line that I couldn't help but laugh a small, surprise sound that cracked open a piece of my wall. Over the next few weeks, I began to notice things about Ethan. He was quiet, but he paid attention. On the bus, he always sat on the aisle, not to block anyone, but to make room for whoever needed it. At home, he understood the unspoken language of our house. When Mom's voice got steady and thin, it meant she was tired but hiding it. When Mark banged drawers a little too loudly, it meant his day had been hard and he didn't know how to talk about it. And when I closed my door a little too hard, it meant I had words boiling under my skin with nowhere to go. Ethan noticed all of this without making a show of it. Late that autumn, a storm rolled into our city, the kind that feels alive, like it has bones and a heartbeat. The sky stacked layer after layer of dark clouds until it felt heavy enough to crush the rooftops. First came the wind, warm and metallic, then the rain, hard and unrelenting, hammering the streets and racing in silver rivers down the gutters. The river that curved around our neighborhood began to rise, inch by inch, then foot by foot, turning calm water into something dangerous and fast. Emergency alerts flashed on our phones. Avoid low-lying areas. Do not attempt to drive through standing water. Shelter-in-place.Mark was out of town on a work trip, leaving Mom, Ethan, and me to handle the house. Mom kept checking the basement for seepage, coming back upstairs with wet shoes and a forced smile. That night, just after sunset, the power flickered and went out completely. The hum of the refrigerator and the buzz of the lights vanished, leaving only the storm's voice outside, louder and more insistent than ever. We moved through the house with flashlights, stacking towels, sealing windows, and lining the back door with old blankets. I told myself everything was fine, that people in this town had been through floods before. But what I saw our old maple tree bough lower and lower in the wind, and felt the floor tremble beneath my feet. I wasn't so sure. Sometime after midnight, Mom realized our cat Pumpkin was missing. He usually hid under my bed during storms, but he was nowhere to be found. I remembered the basement window that didn't latch properly, the one that opened into the narrow side yard where the ground sloped toward the street. Mom was exhausted, so I told her to stay upstairs while I checked. The basement stairs smelled like damp cardboard and old paint. When I reached the bottom, my shoes splashed into a thin film of cold water. My flashlight cut a narrow beam through the darkness, catching on storage boxes and the furnace. Then I saw them, two small, glowing reflections behind the furnace. Pumpkin's eyes. I crouched, whispering to him, moving slowly. He almost came to me, but then a loud gust rattled the loose window. With a terrified scramble, he darted past me and squeezed into the dark space beneath the stairs. I dropped to my knees, reaching into the gap, when the wooden riser above me groaned. It was a deep, tired sound, like the house itself was warning me. I froze. Outside, a violent crack split the night. Later, I learned the storm had snapped the top of the old maple, sending a massive limb crashing into the side wall. At that moment, all I knew was that the stair groaned again, and then everything shifted. The world tilted, wood splintered, a plank slammed into my shoulder, cold water slapped my face. Pain exploded across my temple. I tried to crawl backward, but the collapsing wood trapped me in a wedge of darkness. My voice came out as a raw, wordless cry. And then through the chaos, I heard another voice, fierce and close. Ava! Ethan thought the beam of his flashlight sliced through the dust. He dropped to his knees, his eyes scanning the broken structure, calculating weight, angle, leverage all in an instant. Don't move, he said, his voice steady but urgent. I wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it. What choice did I have? But I stayed still, trembling. He pressed his shoulder against the sagging stair to take some of its weight, then stretched his other arm toward me. His fingers wrapped around my wrists, warm and solid. On 3, he said, calm and sure, like we were playing a game instead of fighting for my life. 1, 2, he moved on 2. The broken tread surged upward just enough. He yanked me forward. Something sharp scraped my calf, but then I was free. Sliding across the wet floor into his arms, the stair gave one final groan and collapsed completely, missing Ethan's shoulder by less than an inch. For a moment, everything went silent except for our ragged breathing and the relentless rain outside. Mom's frantic voice echoed down the stairs, and Ethan called back, "We're okay." His voice cracked, just slightly. He looked at me, mud and water streaking his face, and said, "We're going to the Aya." I tried to argue, but the sticky warmth of blood at my hairline silenced me. He wrapped a towel tight against my head, helped me up, and half carried me up the remaining steps. The cat trailed behind us, unharmed, as if mocking our human chaos. The drive through the flooded streets felt like navigating a river. Water fanned out from the tires. Streetlights stretched into smeared gold ladders on the windshield. And Ethan kept talking, asking me small questions to keep me awake. Favorite cereal. First concert. Best day in 5th grade. His voice was a lifeline. At the AHI, the lights were harsh and cold. Nurses asked questions too quickly. Ethan answered when I couldn't, when they stitched my head. He stood at the foot of the bed, his eyes fixed and serious. At 3 a.m., patched and dizzy, we returned home. Mom wrapped me in blankets on the couch. Ethan sat on the floor beside me, his back against the coffee table, and played his guitar softly. The same calm, looping pattern I'd heard in those first lonely nights. Only now I understood it wasn't just music. It was a promise. The days after blurred into one long stretch of exhaustion and relief. We cleaned debris, bleached walls, tossed ruined boxes filled with memories. And somewhere in that work, my understanding of Ethan shifted. The words stepbrother and stepsister began to feel too small for what we were. Becoming Ethan didn't stop saving me after that night. He walked me to school when I felt unsteady, sat with me during dizzy spells, stood beside me when those mean girls whispered in the hallway until their whispers faded into silence. One evening, weeks later, I asked him why he'd risked so much for me. He shrugged and said simply, "Because you're my sister." Spring eventually came. The city dried out. Life moved forward. But the night of the storm stayed with me, not just as a memory of fear, but as proof of something uncheckable. I told this story months later at a school assembly about community safety. I talked about flood kits and battery radios, yes, but also about how sometimes the real rescue is someone showing up for you again and again. When a girl in the audience asked if I ever stopped being scared, I told her the truth. Fear changes shape, but trust grows stronger. And now, whenever storms come literal or emotional, I know what it sounds like to be saved. It sounds like a guitar in the next room at 2 a.m. It sounds like someone calling your name as if it matters. So here's my truth. Family is not just about bloodlines. It's about who grabs your wrist in the darkness and pulls you into the light. My name is Ava, and I have a brother named Ethan. Not by birth, but by choice, by love. And by the way, one terrifying night became the beginning of a lifetime of trust. And to anyone listening today learning English, learning life, learning to survive, I want you to hear this. Love is a verb. It is built in the small, steady actions we take every single day. This was my story. Now take it with you. Practice it. Share it. And remember that even when the world feels like it's collapsing, someone out there is ready to hold the weight with you, to say without hesitation, "I'm here." Thank you for listening to English Insight, where stories don't just teach words, they teach the heart. And until next time, may your steps be steady and may you always find your way home. Asterisk.